Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is your host, Christian Galvin, and you are listening to The Modern Tech Leaders. In today's premiere episode, we're going to be unpacking the journey of Carolina Nino Vargas. She's going to be discussing on how she was able to realize her engineering dreams here in the United States. She was born in Colombia, and she moved to the States when she was 13 years old. She's going to be talking to us about drones, cloud security, and what it's like to work at a startup. Tune in. Welcome to the podcast. Today I have a very special guest in my life, Carolina Nino Vargas. She's an experienced engineer in various technical domains, so I thought it would be great to kick off the podcast with her so we could explore women in tech that are doing well in their job and that they've overcome adversity so other people get inspired by her journey. So she's an engineer in various technical domains. She got her bachelor's in bioengineering, where she got her work published by her campus. A quote from the article is, "The team worked on a 3D portable ultrasound device to create an affordable and portable system that could be used in extreme environments to aid in diagnosis and treatment of forward deployed wounded military personnel." It's amazing. She also worked for the U.S. Army for a couple of years. She was on the Night Vision and Electronic Sensors Directorate. It's a mouthful. And as if that wasn't enough, she recently earned her master's in systems engineering at George Mason University. I know a lot of friends that graduate at George Mason. It's a top school, and that's a big achievement. Currently, she's a solutions engineer at a prominent cybersecurity company where she's helping clients secure their code. Also, she's helping with the adoption of DevSecOps culture. So Carolina, tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and what got you to where you are today.
Wow, that's a really big question. So to give you a little bit of background on who I am, I'm just gonna get started with just telling you a little bit about my childhood, where I grew up. So I'm originally from Bogota, Colombia. That's where I grew up. I was raised there until I was about 13, 14 years of age. At that time, we got the opportunity to move to this country with my family, and we decided to pack up and leave in a month. So it was a crazy decision that we made as a family, and we just kind of got rid of everything, packed up, and never looked back. So we got to Miami, didn't really know the language or the culture. It was a little shocking just to be in that environment. As a teenager, I guess, 13, 14. It was challenging. My parents were lawyers in Colombia, and in arriving to America and having to be dishwashers and clean bathrooms and things like that were things that they were not used to do. It was challenging the first few months, getting used to just how our life changed so drastically. Eventually, we decided to move to North Carolina so that we could learn better English and we could grow a little bit more in terms of career prospects for my parents. So we moved to North Carolina. I did my high school there, and I decided to pursue engineering out of the state. I decided to move closer to DC, apply to this university called George Mason. What I thought it was right in DC. So I was like, oh my gosh, I get to walk to the Capitol and then walk to class. Not the case. Definitely like 40 minutes away from DC. So fine, I got there. It was a beautiful campus. So I was like, okay, this will do. And then I started my journey with bioengineering. So I pursued my undergraduate in bioengineering. It was probably the toughest years of my life, 4.5 years.
And for those out there that don't know what bioengineering is, can you give us like a rundown of what it is in simple terms?
Sure. So bioengineering is a field. Basically, it's combining medicine with engineering. So it could be you want to be a surgeon or a medical doctor. You can pursue an MD after doing bioengineering as an undergraduate. Or you want to work on imaging technology like X-rays and MRIs and things like that. So you can pursue those aspirations. Or if you want to be a researcher, you want to research cancer per se, you can also do that. So it allows you to explore medicine and engineering together, and then you can choose what you decide to do for your, doctorate degrees or any further education.
Well, so while we're on that topic, can you tell us a little bit about your thesis project that you worked on your undergrad in bioengineering?
Yeah, so my thesis project was regarding ultrasound. It was a very challenging project. It was a year-long project where we needed to basically come up with a way to obtain 3D data from a 1D detection sensor. So basically, the transducer that we were utilizing collected a single data point, and we needed to turn that into 3D to be able to come up with images. And the reason behind this was so that we could make compact technologies for the military. So when they're deployed and a soldier gets wounded, they're able to localize the wound in that austere environment and gain some insight of what's going on with that wound.
What was it like for you during that time? There's many people who struggle to go back to school sometimes, and they're kind of on the edge. Should I go back to school? Should I just not? What is your advice for them, for those who are passionate about something and maybe are considering going back to school?
So when considering going back to school or what program to do when you want to go back to school, I will really look into what is it that you want to do post-graduation. Do you see yourself doing something very technical, or do you enjoy talking to people? Do you see yourself being in a laboratory? And these things can change while you're pursuing your degree. So it's important that you pick a degree that has some ability to change over time, and you can pivot to other things. That's why I really recommend engineering and technology. It allows you to do so many things. You start doing research, you decide you prefer to talk to other people, you can become a solutions engineer, or you decided you love coding, you can become a developer. So there is so much to do when you pick a career that just teaches you so those hard technical skills.
Yeah, that's a very good point that you cover on. Technology is very vast, and there's so many different domains that there's not one thing that you're going to be doing if you do decide to go into it. What is it that drives you?
The things that have driven me throughout my career have changed. So at first, when I was pursuing my undergraduate, I was really driven on becoming an engineer. I really wanted that title. Like, I want to be an engineer. I want to make my family proud. I want to provide for my family in the future. So that was my main driver. Bioengineering, as I mentioned, was a really difficult degree for me. And that drive was what kept me going. It has a high rate for like a dropout rate. People change their majors or drop out of the program. So you constantly have to remind yourself the reason why you're doing whatever it is that you're doing. And that kind of progresses on. When I decided to do my master's, I was not content with the things I was doing in my day-to-day, in my job. I wanted a little more excitement. I wanted to lead others. So that's when I decided to pursue my master's in systems engineering. So always kind of look at your situation, seeing, okay, where I want to be, what do I need to do to get to where I want to be, and just use that as your motivation to get into the next stage.
Yeah, I think I've heard that a lot from different peers in my network. And I mean, folks out there listening to podcasts, they might be going through the same situation. What do you do when you find yourself in a rut, or when you're in a point in your career where you're just unhappy? Is it changing roles, or are there other things that you have done to really reflect on the choices you're about to make?
Mm-hmm. So actually, my first job out of college, it was a challenging one for me because as an undergrad, I was really concerned that I wasn't going to get an opportunity right out of college. Bioengineering is not one of those degrees that there's plenty of opportunities out there. Most people that graduate with that degree, they pursue a master's degree or PhD right after. But I needed a job right out of graduation. So it was a time that was very for me. So when I got that job, I felt like I needed to stay there a long time because they had just given me this opportunity. I felt like I didn't have the skills to find another job. And it was just a lot of my own mind kind of keeping me behind. And then I started noticing all my peers, all my friends, they were learning so many new skills, cloud computing and all these new exciting things that I didn't have the opportunity to learn in that job. So I decided to do something about it. That's when I signed up for my master's degree. Decided to do my master's degree part-time while I worked my full-time job, and just gave myself those 2 years to really get to the next level and then find another job once I had those skills.
Did you face any challenges during that time? Was there something specifically that helped you keep going?
It was a very challenging time for me. Your emotional state really dictates everything surrounding your day-to-day. So if you don't enjoy your job or your team or whatever it is that is causing that mental distress, it really puts you in a bad mindset. Different things helped me. Networking with my different peers helped me a lot. Talking to my family and my friends about how I was feeling, and just them reassuring me that I had the skills to find my next step. So it was just a lot of encouragement for people around me, mentors that encouraged me and told me, you have the right skills, just go out there and search. Like, you just have to search and network. So that's what I did. I networked. I met a lot of people on LinkedIn. I got into this community called Pre-Sales Collective. That is a community for sales engineers and solutions engineers. And I was just very open about wanting to switch my career. And people were very open on, talking to you and helping you out.
Wow, so you really leveraged all the technology that you had available. You feel like college students these days, or young professionals, they're really leveraging LinkedIn, like they're leveraging maybe Instagram or other social media platforms?
No, I don't think so. At least I didn't when I was in undergrad. It was, as a student, I felt like I just didn't have enough to provide to other people so that they could help me back. So I felt like I was asking too much when asking for their time. So I just never felt like I had the ability to reach out to others. I was just like, oh, I'm just a college kid. So that mentality, looking back, didn't help me get to a position that I would be happy with or comfortable with.
And when you had that thought of like, hey, I'm just a college kid, was that pre-work? Was that like at the beginning of your college career, or was that towards the end when you were finishing up your thesis project?
It was more towards the middle and end of my career. Some things during my program were really challenging that kind of put that thought in my mind. It was a lot of, you're the only female in your physics class. There's only probably 3 females in a class of 60. So you start feeling like the small person in the room. So it felt like that, and professors just putting the extra pressure and kind of not providing guidance or support when that guidance and support was needed. So all of those feelings and the pressure of trying to graduate with that degree, trying not to fail those classes or be kicked out of the program, really affect how you portray yourself onto others. So you won't have this confidence radiating out of you, like, hey, I have all these skills, let me apply to your company, or let me introduce myself to you. It's hard to put yourself out there.
And do you have any advice for females that are looking to get into tech? And like you mentioned, you were 3 out of 60 females in a class, so that must be a little bit daunting. So what do you recommend for females looking to get in technology, whether it's computer science, cybersecurity, or software engineering?
Mm-hmm. I never realized that being a female in tech was something out of the ordinary until I started in college here in America. That's when I realized the discrepancies. There's not that many females, and that honestly shocked me. In Colombia, that's not the case. We see females being doctors, engineers, all sorts of things, lawyers like my mother. So I didn't think it was weird until I started and I saw my classes, and I heard other females saying, like, oh my gosh, like, you're like the only girl I know in my class, and things like that. So at first it's a little shocking, but honestly, people are going to doubt you everywhere. Your professors are going to doubt you. Your other peers are going to doubt you, even yourself. So it's important to keep in mind the reason why you're doing what you're doing. Keep in mind that you're doing it for yourself and this is your journey. So if you fail a class, it's okay. I failed classes and I retook them and I graduated. It's fine if you don't graduate in 4 years. It's fine if you take 5. This is your journey. Nobody else is going to remember how long you took. Nobody's going to remember that you retook physics twice or 3 times. Nobody's going to care about that. So just do the things that you love. If you love technology, if you love engineering, do it. And then you'll see. 5 years later, you're like, oh my gosh, I graduated. I can't believe it. It was so hard, but I did it. So if you want to do it, do it.
Yeah, I believe you touched on a very important thing and something that's very near and dear to my heart, that if you do love something, if you do have a dream, just go out there and start doing it. Sometimes you just have to show up, ask questions, and little by little you start gaining experience. But until you put yourself in that uncomfortable position, it's kind of hard to make any traction and you kind of get stuck by analysis paralysis. One more question I guess I wanted to ask you, which on your last response, was that the culture in Colombia is very different than it is here in the US when it comes to STEM careers. So can you provide a little bit more details on what it's like being a female engineer in Colombia, or what it's like if a female were starting her career over there? That was kind of a culture shock when you came to the States in your teens.
Mm-hmm. So my perspective on that stems mainly from the women around me that did those careers. Because I was young, I was 13, 14. But I did see, my mom become a fierce lawyer. She would just go into, with her whole hair and makeup and just with her heels, and she would just go and be very stern in her conversations, and people really respected her, and nobody ever treated her any differently than they treated my father, who was also a lawyer, because he was a male and she was a female. They had the same level of respect. And when people say in Colombia, oh, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be a doctor, it is never like, oh, you're a female. Like, no, it's you just go do it. It's not it's one of those things. And actually, I was looking at some of the statistics and actually found out that Colombia is like one of the only 3 countries in the world that women have more leadership positions than men. So I just found that interesting. Only like 53% of women have leadership positions and men 47. But, is one of the only few countries in the world that has that's the case. So, that gives me also a perspective. Like the United States, it's a little bit different. Women here tend to not be part of STEM careers. I don't know the reason. I wish that wasn't the case, because I think that women, we bring an extra flavor to our fields. We bring a lot of talent. We're able to communicate ideas. We're very good communicators. So in technology, when technology is difficult, it's difficult to understand, it's difficult to teach others. We have more women, more educators that are females. I think the industry could really see a benefit from that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And now that you're talking about females being in tech and how people could benefit, could we talk a little bit about your project that you recently worked on in your master's degree around drones? And really, it's an interesting one because it was a group full of females and the 3 of you tackled a very interesting topic. So could you tell me a little bit about what it was like working with them, what the future of drones looks like for the common citizen that may not be aware of their technology and the advances?
Mm-hmm. So my master thesis was regarding counter-UAS technologies. So these technologies are anti-drone technology, essentially. So these are technologies that help us detect drones in an area, in some cases mitigate a drone in the area, so somehow interrupt their communication or whatever it is. So the task was that to find different counter UAS tools or technologies out there in the market, do a study so that we could come up with specifications on what parameters these counter UAS solutions need to fulfill so that our stakeholders could purchase or procure that technology. So our stakeholders were the Northern Virginia police officers, so the different counties in the Northern Virginia area, especially the George Mason Police Department, which was my university's police department. And our task was to research the different technologies available for counter UASs, the different methods of the censoring methods for these drones, and also come up with a framework per se, or a tool that helps us make a decision on what counter UAS tool is the best to procure. So basically doing a lot of the sifting through this technology and providing the best outcome to our stakeholders. As you mentioned, my team was only females. The girls were amazing to work with. I worked with one of the girls for my undergraduate. We did it together. We both did bioengineering and suffered through, so we decided to do our masters together. And then we met my other friend doing the program. So working with them was great. Each one of them have a specific piece that they brought into the team. One of them is very good with researching and finding more information and intel on these different technologies. And another one was really good at designing simulations and prototypes and anything that has to do with design and the systems engineering process per se.
Nice. Do you see any challenges for normal day citizens with the adoption of drones, and maybe on the research that you did that maybe you'd like to elaborate on?
Sure. The reason why the police department reached out to us so that we could do this project for them is that with the recent years, we have seen that people have used drones for nefarious purposes. So for surveillance of citizens on a day-to-day without their permission. Also using these drones to carry Molotov bombs or weapons, especially in the Ukraine and things like that. The government has expressed that they want more tools available so that we could detect these drones and be able to protect the citizens in an area. So the police department at the university wanted a tool that they could put in place. They could protect the area of the university. If we had a political figure visit the campus or a celebrity, they could put these tools in place and be able to collect any data in the surrounding parts of the campus.
That's really awesome, man. George Mason definitely keeps surprising me every time I go to the campus or I hear the news. Originally, I didn't go to George Mason because I had so many friends from high school that were going there. So I was like, hey, let me go to another school. So I went to George Washington. But George Mason is a great school. I mean, last time I went there was a robot delivering food on campus, which is kind of crazy that some students built that. So that was definitely awesome. And while you were telling us that you were working with different police departments and you were mentioning the government, what are some technologies that maybe we take for granted every day that you've learned that the government created and are just fascinating for our listeners to learn about, maybe that they had no idea?
Well, there's many different tools out there that start with government funding and eventually a private company procures it or does something with it. We have seen many things like the GPS. It all started with government funding for army and different military purposes, and then it kind of got bought out. Well, actually, it was with partnerships with Google, and just grew into its own thing. The weather forecasting, that's also something that started with government funding. So it's just very interesting, not only in that technology aspect, but also in the medical side of things. Lots of the different research that goes on in universities. I used to work at a nanotechnology laboratory back when I was doing my undergraduate, and lots of the different funding comes from the government. So all these different agencies that are designed for our educators and professors in different universities to ask for grants for the different technologies that they are either developing or the research that they're performing. And this research just needs to be proven that it's useful and has a series of stipulations that they need to make sure that they fulfill, and then they get the funding and they're able to provide that back to, us, the individuals.
Yeah, and I think that's very important because in the tech industry, these are things that we know, but for other people who want to get into tech or maybe learn, sometimes it's really cool learning about the history of how things came to be. With it recently New Year's Eve and everybody celebrating the new year, can you give us a little bit of a recap of how 2022 was for you and how it was for your professional development and maybe some things you want to share?
Mm-hmm. Well, 2022 was a really busy year. It was very impactful for me, actually. I mentioned earlier that I was looking for that next career change, and it had been really challenging for me. So all of 2021, I spent, looking for that next opportunity. I wasn't too sure what industry within technology to pivot to. Mm-hmm. And that's when I joined that community for the pre-sales collective community that allows you to talk to other pre-sales engineers or solutions engineers. And there I met a director from my current company. And he was like, hey, I work at this great company. Oh, I mentioned that I wanted to switch industries. And he's like, oh, I know quite a few people that have switched industries. Let's just discuss. So I just jumped on a call with him, and it was great conversation. So he was like, hey, will you want to apply for my company? And I was like, well, okay. So I did. And then I met the person that's now my manager, and it was great. We clicked, and all the other interviews, always being very rigid and very professional. And now it was very relaxed. They just wanted to get to know me. They wanted to know my skills, but they also wanted to know who I was as a person, and that really resonated with me. I decided to go on with the process. Then it was the technical interview, and then it was my demonstration, how to demo the technology that they sell back to them. So that was really challenging. I had to do a lot of studying for 2 weeks to prepare for my technical interview and for that demonstration. So it was very stressful 2 weeks, but it was very successful. They offered me the position. It was completely unreal to me that I was given this opportunity. Gladly, I took it, and I've been working with them since February 2022.
That's amazing, and it's a startup. So could you tell us what it's like working at a startup after having switched from working for the government?
Mm-hmm. So very different work cultures, like night and day. So government is a little bit more rigid. It's a lot of older people. I was one of the 3 females, 40 people on my floor, and I was the only one. I was the only one under 20, 25, 24 at that time. It was kind of scary to kind of ask questions and just learn. So when I started with my current company, a startup, everybody's so willing to talk to you. Everybody's willing to learn together. You can message each other. You can message anyone in the company if you want. You can learn from anyone. Everybody's like, yeah, of course, I'll teach you this. Of course, I'll teach you that. I had to get out of my comfort zone. At first, I was a little overwhelmed. Open up my emails, all these different emails, and people welcoming me to the team and things that I was just not expecting. So it took me actually 2 weeks to really focus on what I was actually supposed to be doing, because I started reading everybody's emails and everybody's messages, and just I was so overwhelmed that I was like, wait, I'm actually supposed to be doing my training and things like that. So it took me a couple of weeks to adjust to just how fast it moves. There's always something to do. There's always something to share. If you notice that I don't know, this documentation is not quite right or something, you're encouraged to, okay, say something, let's fix it. Let's, book an hour in my time and we'll work on it together. To me, that was crazy. I'm like, okay, sure. People are willing to just meet with me and work together. That was crazy.
And if you were to start your career today, excluding all your prior experience, what are things that you would recommend folks to learn? What are the trends that you're seeing, since it's such a fast-paced environment? What are the things you're seeing, and what would you recommend folks learn?
So as a little side note, I appreciate all of my experiences that I've had to this point. That all taught me, technology, how to speak to others, how to work in teams, all those things I've learned through all of my other experiences. But if I wanted to fast track and, start technology today, right? I would recommend learning technical skills. So jumping into the cloud wagon, like learning certifications in the cloud, AWS or Google or Azure, and gaining some knowledge in that aspect. Learning to code is a nice plus. Coding is not everything, so if you don't code, it's completely fine too. There's so many things in technology that you can do nowadays that if you don't enjoy coding, like myself, you can do so many things out there. So I would recommend starting off with something like the cloud, maybe learning how to write an application, so the entire process of the software development lifecycle. So what are the tools that are involved into developing code? What is a container? Just understanding that whole process. So it gives you that much depth. So if you're having an interview with someone, they can see that you understand technology and how it is developed.
Now, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I know that will be useful for some of our listeners out there. It is a common theme that many folks do want to switch careers from what they're doing now, or even if they're at an adjacent industry close to technology. It just seems like it's the future with everything that we've been seeing now. What are some of the trends that you see for the future as far as being in security now?
So definitely the security world is shifting to focusing on securing your code as you're developing it. So we want to fix vulnerabilities when it's easier or when it's easiest, and it's at the build process. So whenever you're writing your code, you want to make sure that whatever you're writing is actually secure, because in the previous ways, or the legacy ways, would be that you build your code, you compile it, you're ready to ship it, but before you ship it, you take it to the security team, they do some tests, and they're like, well, we have so many things to fix here. By that time, that developers are already in their next sprint, developing the next feature, whatever new project that they move on to. So now they have to stop that creative process, whatever they're doing, to go back to that code that, they created maybe a month ago or more, and just revise it and trying to figure out how to fix the vulnerabilities that they just didn't know were there. And now it's taking a lot more of the time, and it's pausing production so they can fix whatever was developed before. So with this new way of testing as your code, it is also easing the burden on the security team, because we are seeing that for every 100 developers in a company, there's only one security engineer. So it's a lot of work for a single security engineer in a company.
Wow, that's really great insight for folks who want to get into security. It's rewarding, yet it can be a challenging field, and there's new technologies that are coming out all the time. How are you staying up to speed with new cybersecurity trends that are coming out?
Mm-hmm. So there's lots of different tools out there and podcasts that you can follow. The main resource is, my enablement team in my company. They produce lots of tools and videos and things that we all stay in tune with. But if I want to listen to something in the car, I'll probably listen to something like the Cloud Security Podcast. They share a lot of good insight into what's happening in the security world. So they will give you information on any recent event that happened and maybe you missed it and you just want to see the highlights. They provide you some context with that. Basically, whatever I'm curious about, I don't know, what is a container? So just, look that up on YouTube and learn as you go. Whatever buzzword you hear a peer say, Google it. You'll figure out what it is, and then you learn as everybody is learning.
Awesome, yeah. Thank you so much for being with us today, Carolina. It was truly a pleasure to learn about your career trajectory, learn about some of the projects you're working on, and if folks want to reach out to you, would LinkedIn be the best spot, or what's the best spot if folks have any questions?
Yeah, LinkedIn, just Carolina Nino Vargas on LinkedIn, and you'll find me.
Thank you for joining us today in our premiere episode, Carolina. If you're hearing this message, you've listened to the entire premiere episode, and for that, I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and if you did, please leave a review and comment on Instagram at The Modern Tech Leaders and on YouTube at Christian Galvin _. Please share this episode with others who may be interested in getting into technology or are curious about cloud security or just want to keep up to date with the current trends in technology. Also, feel free to let me know in the comments what topics you'd like to see in future episodes. And my DMs are open. I'll be answering any questions. See you next week for a new episode.